Hey everyone, and welcome back. So the time has finally come to expand my ebb and flow immerse aquarium plant setup here. I've had this system running for over a year now, and it has been doing an amazing job growing aquarium plants. We've ran all kinds of different experiments, and now that I've had quite a bit of experience growing aquarium plants in all kinds of different setups, I truly believe this is the fastest way and the best way to grow aquarium plants. And because I find it incredibly fun to grow these plants and run these types of experiments, I want to build another setup. And as you can see behind me, I have this setup actually completed, but we just need to go through the setup process and get it dialed in so that it is at a point where we can start adding plants. And that's what we're gonna do in today's video. But the reason why I like this setup so much is because it is incredibly low maintenance. And I have quite a few videos on my channel covering the topic of growing immerse aquarium plants. And if you've seen any of those videos, you know that the ebb and flow method that I have in this system is by far my favorite. It offers all kinds of different advantages to growing these plants. And I think growing immerse aquarium plants in particular really benefit from this type of growing condition because it offers an incredible amount of humidity as well as really good control over the nutrients that you can be feeding your plants. And because of those reasons, the plants grow incredibly quickly, but it is also pretty easy to maintain this system. I'm just one person in my fish room, and there's about 500 plants that can grow in this system here. And the one behind me, we'll do an official count in this video to see exactly how many net pots we can fit in these tubs. But based on a quick estimate that I did, it should be able to double the capacity of all the immerse plants that I can grow in my fish room and be well over 1,000 plants once everything is fully set up and growing to its max capacity. All right, so with all that said, the new system behind me here is really customized mainly to fit into my closet here. I don't have a ton of space in my fish room, so I definitely wanted to fit this into my closet so that I could kind of keep it out of the way while also growing tons of aquarium plants. So let's quickly go over exactly how this system is gonna work. So the very basics to how this system works is I have a bottom sump that is going to keep all of the nutrient solution, and using a pump, we're just going to simply pump the water to the top of our growing beds. And with gravity, that water is going to trickle through all of these containers and eventually make its way back into the sump and completing that cycle. What makes this system a little bit unique is that I'm using what's called a bell siphon in order to cycle the water through these containers. And so what a bell siphon is it's simply a way to drain water in a container or a growing bed, just like the one I have here. And the water follows a specific pattern where it rises to a certain point and then the bell siphon kicks on and then it drains pretty much all the way to the bottom of the container. And so bell siphons really aren't a new concept. It's a method that's used in a lot of different hydroponic setups. And I've just scaled it down here so that each one of these individual grow beds has a small bell siphon hooked up. And as the water fills in this container, it will eventually kick on the bell siphon and then drain completely, so that every time the water cycles through one of these grow beds, we have a flooding period where nutrient is flooded to all of the plants that are in this container. And then as the water level drains in this container, all of the plant roots that were previously exposed to the water now get exposed to the oxygen in the air, and that's going to really promote a lot of really great growth. And you can actually see that happening in this container here. If I just pull up some of these plants that are growing, you can see that there are tons of roots here where there is no water in these containers. So these roots are now exposed to the oxygen. And periodically when the pump kicks on, those roots are going to be temporarily flooded with water. And that's actually going to be bringing the nutrients that are growing these plants. So it's a mixture of providing water and nutrients to the plants followed by oxygen to the roots. And that combination really promotes a lot of healthy growth. And so to build a bell siphon, it's really simple. As you can see here, I've got a small bulkhead with a hole drilled in our grow bed. And this is just sealed with a little bit of silicone as well as threading it down nice and tight. And this is actually purchased as an electrical conduit bulkhead from Home Depot, as well as this PVC fitting here, which is just threaded on one end and has a slip fitting on the other end. And what this piece of pipe does is it actually sets the height that the water is going to cycle through our grow bed. So as you can see here, the water level will rise to this point here before overflowing down. And so the nice thing about this fitting is that if I want the water level to rise even higher in this grow container, let's say for example, I'm growing some larger plants and I want more water to cycle through, I can simply cut a piece of PVC and slip that into this slip fitting, and then I can cut that to whatever height I want the water level to rise to. And in order to complete the bell siphon, I have the bottom piece of a water bottle here that I just cut to size, and I include some notches at the bottom of the water bottle just so that water can pass through. And all that has to be is positioned on top of our standpipe, and that will complete the bell siphon. So as water drains through our standpipe, it's going to pull a siphon up through this water bottle, and it's going to drain the water in this container until the water reaches the bottom cuts in the water bottle there. And so this setup has 8 different grow containers. So that means we have 8 different bell siphons. And the beautiful thing is that when one bell siphon drains, it is plumbed to drain into the container that's immediately below it. So it cycles all of that water through these containers until it eventually reaches the bottom sump. And so because each one of these grow beds drains to the grow bed immediately below it, and I have 2 per level, that does mean that I have to pump water individually to each one of these top grow beds. And so in order to do that, I have one pump in my sump that is branched using a T-fitting. And then each one of these branches goes up to the individual grow beds. And I have separate ball valves so that I can dial those in so that their output is relatively similar to one another. And so as you can see here, these are the 2 ball valves that control the output of our pump. So once we get water in this system, we'll be able to control each one so that the pump is adding the same amount of water into each one of the top grow beds. I've just got some small PVC hooks here that hang over the side of the grow beds, and this is where the water enters the container. All right, so my next step to setting up this system is to fill my bottom reservoir with water so that we can run the pump and make sure everything is dialed in before mixing nutrients and adding plants into the setup. So what I can do is use my Python water changer to fill this bottom reservoir up with water. But I know that in the future, I'm going to be mixing nutrients, and it's really important to know exactly how much water volume is in your reservoir. And especially because I'm not going to be filling this 100% to the top, I kind of want to know and set a limit at how much water is going to be within this reservoir. So what I'm going to do is use 5-gallon buckets to kind of figure out roughly how much water volume is going to be in this system. So for example, the setup that I have behind me here, I only keep 10 gallons in the reservoir at any given time. And when I mix nutrients, I add 5 gallons of fresh water and then another 5 gallons of full strength hydroponic fertilizer. And so once those are combined together, I get half strength fertilizer, which I found is a really good concentration of nutrients for the plants that I'm growing in here. So I'm planning on doing something similar here. I might try to see what 20 gallons looks like so that I have a little bit more water volume here so that I don't have to change water too often. So let's start by adding water in 5-gallon increments, and then we'll go from there. All right, so we added 20 gallons into the reservoir, and I flipped on the pump just to make sure everything was running smoothly. I did find that the grow beds on the left-hand side filled a little bit faster, so I dialed that back just slightly with the ball valve, and now everything fills at exactly the same rate between the 2 different branches off of the pump. So that's really great. And honestly, it is super satisfying watching these bins fill and drain at around the same speed between the left hand and the right hand side, which is going to be super important for the consistency of growing plants in these bins, as well as down the road when we're running some experiments. It's really important to make sure that the growing conditions inside these bins is all relatively similar so that it's only the experimental variable that is going to be influencing the growth of the plants because we don't want a ton of confounding variables. So for that reason, all of these bins, should have relatively similar growing conditions. And speaking of which, one of the main growing conditions for these bins is the lighting that we're going to be giving our plants. So I'll go over a little bit what I'm thinking of doing for lighting. And I actually have one here, and this is a 2-foot LED strip. And it's actually a V-shaped LED, so it's got a slight angle to the LEDs, which is going to be really important for making sure that the entire footprint of our grow beds gets an even distribution of light, and that's going to allow all of the plants in there to grow evenly. And so each one of these LED strips runs at 20 watts and has a Kelvin rating of 6,000, so it's a cool white light. And this is actually a new LED light that I haven't tested with growing immerse aquarium plants. So I'm really excited to see how this does. But I've used similar LED strips in the past, and they've all grown plants really well. So I'm sure this will do a good job. I am kind of moving a little bit away from the pink hue grow lights. They do a really great job at growing the plants, but I personally don't really love the look of the light. It's a little bit too pink, and it can come across a little strange on camera sometimes. So for that reason, I'm going with a more neutral color tone with the cool white LEDs, and we'll see if that has any detrimental effect on the growth of the plants. But from my testing, I've used a similar color in LEDs before, and it's grown the plants really great. And at 20 watts, this is putting out quite a bit of light, so I expect it's going to be growing our plants really well. And because we have 4 shelves that are growing the plants in this new setup, I've got 2 of these LED strips per level, so a total of 8 LED strips in this system. And so all of these lights, including my older Emer setup, are hooked up to the same timer, and that timer runs for 14 hours on every single day. And so I also run my pump on a timer, which is what I have here. And the nice thing about this timer is that it allows me to choose a number of minutes that the pump goes on as opposed to hours. And so actually with my testing, I find that running the pump here between all of these grow beds for 1 minute gives me the perfect amount of water volume to do 1 complete cycle through all of these tubs. So what I've set this to is 1 minute on so that I could do 1 cycle, and then 10 minutes off so that the plants have 10 minutes of oxygenation to their roots. And I found on my older ebb and flow system, I've done a similar interval to this, and the plants have responded really well to that. I don't think it's necessary to constantly be running the pump because the plants can only uptake so much nutrients, and the nutrients in our hydroponic fertilizer is super concentrated. So it's really not necessary to constantly be flushing the substrate that we're going to be putting in here with fresh nutrients. Instead, I think it's more beneficial to have the oxygenation get to the roots. And as a result, I've been having some really great growth. So we're going to continue with that in our new ebb and flow system. All right, so now that everything is running smoothly and we have all of the ball valves dialed in, I'm really dying to know exactly how many plants we're going to be able to grow in our new ebb and flow system. So what I've got here are a bunch of net pots. These are actually the 2-inch net pots, which is my preferred method for growing Immerse aquarium plants. And that's what I'm going to be using in my new setup. So I've got a ton of these, and I'm going to go ahead and just in one of these bins, I'm going to place the 2-inch net pots just to see the maximum amount that we can fit based on the footprint of these new tubs. And we'll be able to determine exactly how many plants we can grow in this setup. So let's go ahead and do that and see exactly how many plants we can grow when this is at its max capacity. All right, so after playing around with these net pots for a little bit, I was able to fit 75 net pots in this one tub, but I found it was a little bit chaotic. So with a little bit of reorganization, I was able to remove a few net pots and get everything nice and comfortably sitting together so that it's a little bit easier down the road when I'm maintaining plants. I can easily take them out and replace the plants without everything being too crowded. So with that said, I was able to comfortably place 70 net pots in this one tub. Now, because we have 8 of these tubs, that gives me a total capacity of 560 plants. Now, that's actually an improvement to my older ebb and flow system. Believe it or not, this system actually only has a max capacity of 495 plants. So combining the old setup with the new setup, we'll have a total capacity of 1,055 plants, which is really awesome to reach that 1,000 mark and be able to maintain all of those plants. So the next step is to grow some plants and get to that point where we can actually say that we have 1,000 plants in my fish room. So that's gonna be my next step here. I've got a ton of these net pots to fill up, and I have a ton of plants that I can propagate and start growing in this setup. But I also want to get some new species as well. So we'll see exactly what we end up doing with this new setup and all this extra space to grow plants. So stay tuned for my future videos where we start to move some plants into this setup and get them growing. And if you're curious to learn more about how easy it is to maintain a system like this, click through to this video here and I go over exactly how I'm able to maintain all of these plants. And it is a super simple method, so I'm sure you'll enjoy that video. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care.